Welcome, dear students. This is the last lecture of your mid-semester 1 as well as unit number 4. In requirement analysis and specification, we will now move on to the inception task in detail, which is the feasibility study, and the specification part, which is the SRS. We shall see both these in details in this lecture. Now we are moving on to feasibility. In feasibility study, we are going to see about what is feasibility, what things are studied, and what are the types of feasibility. Okay, now before we move into feasibility, we will first see what feasibility actually is. So feasibility is nothing but a kind of practicality or viability or checking whether something is possible or not possible. This is called feasibility. Okay, so you can say in other words that feasibility is nothing but you are trying to assess something. Now what are you assessing? Assessment of what? So assessment of the practicality of a proposed project means, are you able to make this project successfully or not? Then you are assessing the aims of the project. You are assessing the strength, the limitations of what the current market needs are. You are checking or assessing the opportunities and threats that are present in developing this project. You are also assessing the resources that are available in order to develop this project. You are also assessing whether developing this project will be successful or not. So checking all of this is nothing but determining practicality. Okay, so let us move forward with feasibility study. Now feasibility study, first thing is it checks the practical extent to which a project can be performed successfully. So here we are trying to determine whether whatever project is given to you, will you be able to deliver it successfully in high quality in time to the customer. Second thing is you are determining whether the solution that you are considering is practical and workable. So if you are getting a project, you will, let us say, for example, you are deciding upon the technology in which you are going to develop the software. Okay, so is your technology practical? Is your approach of development practical? Means if you are developing it with a waterfall model, is it correct? Will you be able to apply the waterfall model in this or not? Will it work or not? So you are determining the way of development, is it correct or not? The type of solution that you are giving is correct or not? Whatever you are going to provide to the customer, will it be used in the market or not? So that is going to determine whether your project will fail or it will be successful. Then the things that you are going to study in feasibility is your resource availability. Now resource can be in form of manpower, it can be in form of hardware, it can be in form of software, it can be in form of infrastructure, it can be in form of support from the higher management. So all this comes under resource availability. It can be in terms of cost also. So your resource availability means all these things are readily available to you or there is a question mark. Next is cost estimation for software development. So you are going to estimate a cost. Now how you are going to estimate cost, we will study in chapter number 3, unit number 3. So we are estimating costs using COCOMO model, Delphi model, Halstead methods, feature point metrics. All these things are going to help you to find out the total or the average cost, nearly roughly the estimate you are giving depending on whatever efforts you are going to put in your software. Next is benefits of the software after development. So after you are developing the software, delivering it to the customer, what kind of benefits will the software give? The benefits can be given to the organization who is developing it. It can give to the person who is launching the software, what kind of benefits the users of the software will be getting. So all this analysis is also necessary in feasibility. And maintenance cost. Maintenance cost is nothing but you are trying to find out what kind of maintenance cost you will have to bear after the project is being delivered. So it can be in terms of any after service that you have to provide. So there may be cases where if you are using a software or making a software like Tally, which is doing accounting, then after a year in when the financial year ends, you need to do some updates in the software. Okay, so such kind of maintenance you require, so that is also going to have an additional cost. So maintenance cost has to be added in cost estimation also. You should show that there also. So all these things are a part of your feasibility study. Okay, next we have uh, types of feasibilities. So there are a total of 3 different types of feasibilities. There are still more, but the main are technical, operational, and economic feasibility. First, we move on to technical feasibility. So technical feasibility is nothing but first you are trying to find out whether your ideas, the ideas of the customer, can they be developed into a working system. So it gives a question mark whether this system can be developed or not. So it is said that capability of converting ideas into a working system is nothing but technical feasibility. Next is you are assessing your resources. Now resources can be in terms of hardware, software, in terms of technology, in terms of manpower, in terms of infrastructure, in form of cost. So, but not exactly cost here, but all these things are taken into consideration because cost we are going to cover in economic feasibility. But these are the various resources that you will consider. So are these resources readily available to you? If no, there is a question mark on the technical feasibility of your project. Next is, when you know that you are having enough manpower, you have to analyze the skills of the people in your development team. Are they having proper capabilities to develop the software? Are they knowledgeable? Do they have technical skills? Are they experts in a particular technology in which you are going to develop? Because if you have hired people saying that we have projects in .NET and suddenly you are shifting your technology to Java, then there is a question mark in technical feasibility as to whether they will be able to develop it in a same way in Java too, as they were doing in .NET. Next is whether the relevant technology is stable. Means if the technology that you are using is having certain kinds of bugs in it, then whatever product you will develop with the help of that technology will also have those bugs. Okay, so if you are using Java technology and you are using NetBeans in it, then NetBeans is going to have certain kinds of bugs. So due to that, the program that you will develop is also a program or software that you are developing will be susceptible to those errors. Also, you can take another example of Windows. So Windows 8 they had developed. Windows 8 also had certain kinds of errors and it was not a very stable operating system, sturdy operating system. So if any software you are installing on such an environment, then the infrastructure that environment will be providing will also be susceptible to some kinds of faults. Next is consultation possible if problem arises. Now suppose you have developed this project without considering feasibility, technical feasibility of the project. You have delivered it to the client. Now there is some after service that you need to give, and that after service your organization is not able to provide. Then your project will is indirectly failing because it will not be of help to the one who is using or the one who has launched the software. So technical feasibility is going to cover all this. Next, we'll move on to operational feasibility. Operational feasibility is accessing the extent to which The software will be useful to solve business problems and user requirements. Now, operational feasibility means uh, when your software is operating properly in the market, will it be able to properly work in the market? So to check its usability in the market, you are supposed to check what kind of user requirements it is fulfilling and what kind of business problems it is solving. So if I have a very big problem, say 5 to 10 tasks, and my software is going to fulfill only 2 or 3 of them, then bringing out such software in the market will not be very useful for the developer, organization, or to the person who is launching the software. So you need to take or tackle those problems which are going to have a very large targeted audience, where more number of people can use it, and it can be of use to a lot of people, a very large audience. Next is, you should focus on these things. First thing is whether problems faced are of high priority. Because if there are a number of problems and you are solving the problem which can actually be solved at last, if you are giving it a more priority, then there is no use of operational feasibility. Next is, are there acceptable solutions? So you have to ask yourself while developing the software, that this kind of software I'm going to put in the market. You have to visualize it, and you have to say that whatever I'm providing is acceptable or not. Will it be welcomed by the people, or it won't be useful to them? Next is, will users adapt to the new software? That is a question you should ask yourself first. Because uh, let us take a simple example first. Ticket booking was something that was done manually. Okay, even in the bus, you had a ticket conductor who used to staple that, punch that ticket and give it to you. So that was a technology used first, but now they have that electronic meters. You just enter where you want to go, from where you want to go, and you directly get a receipt. So, will the conductor be able to use such kind of system in day-to-day life? Will he be able to incorporate this feature in his day-to-day life? Will he adapt to this software? So that also you need to consider, because if he won't be able to accept it in his day-to-day life, your software won't be operationally feasible. It won't be used that much. Next is, mainly you should consider operational feasibility that is dependent on the development team and visualization of installed operating software. So your operational feasibility mainly depends on these two things. It depends on your development team. The development team is how effectively they are going to work. Are they going to give a high quality software? Are they skillful? Can they develop this? Can they choose a technology which is stable in order to build this project? So your success will depend on the development team. Also, it will depend on how good you are at visualizing the software which is operating currently. So whatever your requirements you are gathering from the user, from the consumer or the customer, you have to visualize them, and based on that you should be able to see, or you should have a vision that your software which you are developing should work in these ways. So how powerful is your visualization? Your project operationality will be successful based on this visualization. Next, we move on to economic feasibility. Now, economic feasibility will determine whether your software is capable of generating financial gains. Now, financial gain is very important, because everything in this world works on money, money, and money. So, if you are developing a software and it is not giving you things in return, so you are actually developing it in a loss, and you don't want that. So, economic feasibility is going to check whether the cost that you are giving in the development, you should get something more in return than what you have spent. Your return over investment should be more. It will focus on these three things. First is producing long-term gains. So if you are not able to gain too much from a project, then it is not going to be useful. So there should be a long-term profit in developing the software. Next is cost of requirement elicitation and analysis. You need to consider the cost of elicitation and analysis, because when you are gathering requirements, you are calling the customer, you are talking to him, you are spending days, you are spending your time. So your time is money actually. So that is also taken into consideration. Then what kinds of requirements your customer is giving you, that will also come under this. Okay, so you are analyzing it. So analysis also will take a lot of time. There you have to put in your visualizations, you have to put your UML diagrams, you have to show data flows. So your modeling part will come into picture. So that is also going to generate cost. Next is the cost of developing software, cost of your hardware if you are using any, then cost of your team, because team is going to put in lots of effort when they are coding. So that will also be costed, that will also cost you. And last is training. So if there is a newcomer, you need to train them so that they can gel well with whatever your practices are. Okay, so all these costs should be taken into consideration when you are determining the economic feasibility of your project. You should know that this much cost that you have estimated for the project, this cost is given to you in terms of return over investment. Your client should be able to provide you with that much of budget. Okay, so you should know what your budget is in order to develop the software, and you should put that budget towards forward to the consumer. Next is what it involves. It involves development of team, cost of development of team, then cost of hardware, cost of software, and you should not forget the cost of the feasibility study, because all these things, technical feasibility, operational, economical, any kind of feasibility study requires lots of effort, brain efforts, brainstorming, lots of thought ideas, all these are going into action. So all these costs are also added to the budget. So this was all about feasibility. We shall now move on to SRS, or software requirement specification. It is a part of the requirement engineering process where we had a clause or a phase called specification. We are moving into details of the specification phase. Now in SRS, we are going to study these four things. Let us move on to details. Now what is an SRS? Now before we move into an SRS, I would like to tell you more about what actually an SRS is. Now SRS is a software requirement specification. Now, software requirement specification is simply a document in which you have a detailed description of all the various aspects of the software that you are going to build. And this SRS has to be built or specified before your project is starting. Now, why before your project is starting? Because if you decide to give the software for development to a third party, and if you don't have such an SRS or this kind of document, then it will lead to several business issues. Then your system will become very complex. Then you may have your developers won't be able to develop it as per the customer's requirements, and there will be many different obstacles coming around. Okay, so SRS is a very important document in order to deliver a good quality software, a professional software in-time software and a complete unambiguous software. Okay, so SRS is nothing but a document that is completely specifying the proposed software. So your SRS has all the details of the software, and everything is very, very completely written inside your SRS. It is a kind of formal document. Okay, next is it describes what it should do and not how it does. So your SRS itself is saying that it is something about the software. What? Requirement specification. So all the list of requirements, be it functional or be it non-functional. Now functional requirements are like issuing a book, or it can be test, it can be a report generation, it can be client management, it can be practitioner management. So all these are your functional requirements, and non-functional can be security, non-functional can be reliability, non-functional can be operability. So all these various requirements are clubbed and put inside the requirement specification document. So from there, the developers will come to know what they need to develop, how they need to develop, and what the final product should be like. It will specify only what should be done, but not the method of how it should be done. Okay, so it contains what? It contains a complete information description. Okay, so it will have a complete information of what the client is expecting from the software, what it should do. Next is it is giving you functional description or functionalities or features of your system, and then it is representing the behavior of the system. Behavior of the system means you are having those requirement modeling diagrams like your DFDs, like your UML diagrams, like use case, class, sequence, activity, swim lane, state diagrams. So it shows the behavior, it shows the flow, and all these things are depicted. Next, it is going to give you performance. It is going to show how your performance should be in the system, and it gives any design constraints, if any. Okay, so what are design constraints? Design constraints are before, when you are doing some sort of requirement analysis, then before you move on to your design or GUI, you should ensure that you know all the design goals of your system. Now, design goals can be related to cost, they can be related to maintenance, they can be related to user specifications, they can be dependent on performance that they want with the system. So all these design goals should be very clear in your mind before you start your designing. Okay, so these are the design constraints. So your design constraint should be clear, and your validation criteria should also be clear. Validation means if a user wants a specific format for a data entry, then anything apart from that format, if you are entering in the form, then it should be given as a wrong entry and you should be able to enter it again. So such kinds of things are validations. So all these things are clearly mentioned in the SRS, and it should help the client understand what they want, because these SRSs are given to them to see whether they are this is what they actually want from the software. Okay, now what are the characteristics of a good software? So a good software or a good SRS should have these many things. Actually, it is characteristics of good SRS, not good software. Okay, now characteristics of a good SRS is an SRS should be correct and accurate. There should be no errors in the software requirement specification document, because if there are any errors in this document, the software that you are going to develop is also expected to have a lot of errors. Next is it shouldn't be ambiguous. Now ambiguous means there shouldn't be any kind of doubts. Okay, doubts you can say, or any contradictory requirements, because a software that you are developing, you may have multiple clients for a software. So one client may be asking that ring a bell when there is a fire. ring a bell. The other may be saying that if there is fire, you turn on the firefighting extinguishers automatically. So these two things are totally contradicting. So you have to take care that in your SRS there are no ambiguous requirements. Your SRS should be complete, because an incomplete SRS will deliver an incomplete software. Next is you are ranking the importance, and you are ranking the stability of all the features that you are adding in your system. Because if you are delivering a requirement which is actually not very useful, you can implement it at last, and you are actually giving it first or delivering it in the first increment using the incremental model, then your SRS may not be that effective. Okay, and it may not bring happiness and satisfaction to the customer. Next is it should be modifiable. Why modifiable? Because you already know that your requirements or user requirements are volatile. They may be changing at any time. So you should be able to incorporate all the coming requirement changes in your SRS. Therefore, it should be modifiable. It should be traceable. It should be traceable because this SRS document is a reference for the developers as well as the customer. So the customer should be able to trace what is the current progress in their development software, and the developers should be able to trace what and where they are currently in the whole phase of software development. So it should be traceable. It should be verifiable in terms of validations, verifiable in terms of asking the customer what they want is completely specified inside. And lastly, your SRS should be consistent. Consistent means whatever details you are specifying, they are unambiguous and they are totally correct. They will not change with time. Okay, so they are consistent. Now we'll move on to the template of SRS. This template I have divided into 2 pages. This part or this slide will show you only about what is the first page of your SRS like. In your front page, you have title, software requirement specification or SRS4. You are supposed to write your project name and the version of your SRS. So when you are starting to write an SRS, you will have 0.1 as your version or 1.0 as your version. Then you will write down prepared by author, means the one who is writing the SRS document, the name of the organization in which the document is created, and the date of creation of the SRS. Then it will have table of contents and it will have a revision history. Revision history is applicable only when your version number is not 1, it is 3 or 4 or 5. In that case, the what revision you have done from the previous version is what you are supposed to specify in revision history. Now let us see what is there actually inside the SRS. So the SRS consists of these 6 features. The first is introduction. In the introduction, you are supposed to specify what is the purpose of developing the particular project or a particular software. Then document conventions. Document conventions is all about what kind of documents you are going to provide along with this software, what kind of naming conventions, what kind of coding conventions you want. If you are developing in an object-oriented methodology, then class name should be in capitals. The first letter should be in capitals. If you are having methods, then you are following the lower camel case. So all these are conventions. Next is intended audience and reading suggestions. Means if you are reading this particular SRS, then what kind of people will be able to understand this software, this SRS report, and if they are supposed to give any suggestions to the reader, like there may be some terms which you won't be able to understand, or they may be giving you some suggestions that keep a dictionary with you while reading, or you may need a calculator in order to calculate something. So all these are reading suggestions. Project scope is going to define the technical aspect of your project, what kind of technical use this particular software is going to give. And references, if any, like from where you are doing your domain analysis, from where you have got these ideas, whom you have had a talk with. Okay. Next, you have overall description. Now, overall description is going to tell you more about a product perspective, how a product actually looks like, or how it is going to be seen as. Okay, next you have product features, where you are going to list out all the basic needs that the client wants. Next is user classes and characteristics, who the users of your software will be and what kind of characteristics they will exhibit. Next is the operating environment, means you can talk about what kind of environment they will be developed in, whether it's for Windows, whether it's for Apple, whether it's for any Android. Okay, so next is design and implementation constraints. So what kind of design goals they are going to follow? Like, is your software having cost constraints? Is it having dependability constraints or any performance type of constraint? Next is user documentation. So what kind of documentation or what kind of user manual you are going to provide to the user. And last is assumptions and dependencies, which is going to talk about what kind of assumptions you have done before you are using the software, or you can show what kind of audience can use this software, or we have assumed that people, those who are going to use this software, they know these many things, and now they can directly start using the software after knowing those things. Okay, next is system features or functional requirements. Here you are going to list out all the functions or features that you want in the system. Like if we take the example of cardio health monitor, then client registration, practitioner registration, login, managing account, taking tests, managing reports, managing clients, generating reports. Okay, these are the various features. External interface requirements are the user interface that you are going to use, what kind of GUI you are going to give, if there are any hardware used. In our case, it was CardioClip. Are there any other softwares that are used along with the software that you are developing? Are there any communication interfaces, like if you are attaching a USB with your software, then that is a sort of communication. If you are having some email sending messages, then that is a communication interface. Then you are specifying the non-functional requirements. Now, non-functional requirements can be what kind of performance you are giving, what kind of safety requirements you are having in your software, what kind of security needs your system is exhibiting, what kind of quality your software is being giving. And apart from these, you have other requirements that is mentioned in the appendix. Now, appendix will have glossary. Glossary is nothing but all the important terms which may be very technical to the person who is going to use it. So before that, they should be able to have a proper glossary. This glossary will help the developer as well as the user. Next is the analysis model, means all your UML diagrams, BFD diagrams, etc. And last is any issues or limitations list, if any. So this is your software requirement specification document template. Okay, so now lastly we can conclude with the importance of SRS. If you do not have an SRS, the customer will not be able to know whether all his needs have been incorporated in the software. He will not be able to check. There will be no mechanism for the customer to know whether whatever he has written has been developed and delivered to him efficiently. For the developers, it's a problem if you don't have an SRS, because he will not be able to know whether the product has been developed according to the customer's requirement or not. Are there still features to be added or not? That is, it will not make the project traceable. So it will not make the project traceable for the customer as well as for the developer. For maintenance engineer, it will be a problem because he will not be able to maintain the software, he will not be able to understand the software, and if he has to give any after service to the customer, he won't be able to deliver it successfully. And lastly, documentation or user manuals will not be able to be created properly if there are no SRSs. So this is what we have studied regarding SRS and feasibility today. With this, we are ending the syllabus of mid-semester 1 as well as unit number 4. Thank you.